Excellent. Many thanks. Many thanks for inviting me to talk. My talk is slightly different. It's more what's going to happen after the COVID crisis. That for the coronavirus, we have some answers already, but we have many questions left. As you know, some of the most effective measures have been around hygiene, like hand washing, physical distances, and also self-isolation when you're ill. And what we've seen also around the world led to severe lockdowns. And this has produced some kind of interesting data, these lockdowns. So here in Spain, we have a very severe lockdown. And if you look at some of the impacts, what we're seeing here in Barcelona and Catalonia is that there's a reduced physical activity level in the population of around 40%. There's an increase in poor mental health of about 20%. Increase in domestic violence around 20%, but also at the same time reduced traffic 70 to 80%, reduced air pollution between 70 and 90%, reduction in noise levels, but unfortunately also a green space visits reduction. Now, some of these things like the reduction in traffic, air pollution and noise are pretty good for health. And the question is, can we sustain this in the longer term? Now, there is nothing better than having a crisis for making changes. This is some of the prerequisites, what you need for making change in society. And the first one is to have a crisis. And after that, you need to have knowledge, technology, partnership, vision, and leadership to make use of these crises to make changes. We've already got a fairly good understanding that there's a relationship between how cities are designed, the behavior of people, pathways of environmental and lifestyle pathways, and morbidity and mortality. So if you invest and design a city for cars, you get a lot of people that use cars, which leads to air pollution, noise, heat island effects, stress, lack of social context, lack of physical activity, what leads to increased morbidity and mortality, premature mortality. On the other side, if you invest more in active transportation infrastructure like cycling, you get more people to cycle, but it gives you less air pollution, less noise, less heat island effects, less stress, social contact, more social contacts, and less physical activity. What leads to less morbidity and premature mortality. Now, is what we're going to be seeing in the future, at least for the next year, that we're going to have this kind of 1.5 meter distance society. We need to stay away from each other. What has, for example, an impact on transport and public space. I've made here a very simple table looking at different transport modes. What is the contagion risk, the space needs for this particular transport mode, health benefits and environmental impacts. If you look at the car, I mean, the contagion risk in principle is fairly low if you're sitting by yourself in the car, but there's a large demand on public space. On the other side, also the health benefits are fairly low and the environmental impacts are fairly large. If you look at public transport, you have a high contagion risk. But on the other side, you've got medium demand on space. There are some health benefits and the environmental impacts are smaller. On the other side, when you look at the active transportation modes, the contagion risk is actually fairly low. There's not a lot of space, public space demand. They have high benefits because of physical activity, and they have low environmental impacts. So there have been a number of stories around this, that we need to make more space in cities. We need to look at how do we divide public space. For example, we've seen that Paris has a plan now to keep out the cars after the lockdown. And also a city like Milan talks about ambitious schemes to reduce car use. And I think that's what you see in many cities at the moment. So, the question is, can these things actually stay, and what are some of the solutions that we need to see in the future for this to happen? And I'm going to give you a few examples, I think, what are important. The first one is, how we're going to use land. Secondly, how we reduce car use and move more towards public and active transportation. And also don't forget about greening cities, because that's important as well. So first of all, the public space in cities is often fixed, but how it's used, you can actually change. And this is an example of Barcelona. This is typically the urban structure, the urban design in Barcelona, where you see the grid system with cars going up and down. And then you've got the apartment blocks. Originally, the city was designed to be healthy with wide streets, with a lot of fresh air. And then the streets got filled up with cars, causing high air pollution. So when we look at this in a figure, you can see on the left side the current situation, where you've got traffic, motorized traffic going up and down, etc. And now the idea is to create super blocks in Barcelona to recuperate public space, because streets are public space, from cars and giving them back to people. And so what is the idea is to cut off 4 junctions in a unit of streets, and not let the cars go through, but actually have only people walking and cycling. So you have more public space for people and less for cars. Here is an example. This is one of them. Is the Barcelona Superblock in Sant Antoni. The top picture is what was the previously, and then the bottom one you see what is after that. So you can see that the cars have been taken away, and there is more green space and more space for people. Now, so far there have been only 3-4 super blocks, but what if you could implement 500 super blocks as envisaged in Barcelona? And we did some modeling, and we found that over 600 deaths could be prevented each year if 600 super blocks would be implemented in Barcelona. The greatest benefits come from the reduced air pollution levels, what accounts for almost 300 deaths, and then it's followed by noise reduction, heat reduction, because you would use the space differently and you would get more green space, so you reduce heat downed effects. The benefits through increase in green space, and also some increase in physical activity, although we haven't taken into account all the physical activity. The other thing is trying to move people away from the car to using other modes of transportation, like cycling. Cycling has many benefits. It reduces premature mortality. It combines, transport with going to the gym. If you, for example, if you use the bicycle to go to work, of course, less air pollution, noise, no CO2 emissions, uses less public space, and it creates more happiness. In general, physical activity from cycling well outweigh any risks of air pollution and accidents. What we saw in a recent study when we looked at 168 cities in Europe, that it was a almost linear relationship between the availability of secure cycling lane infrastructure per 100,000 people, what is at the bottom of this graph, and the transport mode of cycling, up to about 25%. So up to 25% transport mode of cycling, you see almost a direct relationship. After that, this relationship breaks down. So now the question is, if you would get everyone in these 167 cities, if you get everyone to cycle or get cycling mode up to 25%, how many deaths could you prevent each year? And we could prevent almost or over 10,000 deaths per year, each year in these cities, if the mode share actually would go up. Now, the other thing is what I mentioned is green space. Just looking at this picture, it relaxes you already. You think from this is a place I would like to be rather than sitting in my office. And of course, green space has many benefits, is what we know now. It reduces premature deaths. We have fewer mental health problems, better cognitive functioning, better mood and healthier babies. It mitigates air pollution, heat and noise levels. It helps with the CO2 sequestration. And, with replacing roads and parking with green environments, we can actually change an environment that's detrimental to health to something that's beneficial. So a recent health impact assessment of Kondo et al. In Philadelphia showed that if they increased the tree cover in Philadelphia from 20% to 30%, they could prevent over 400 deaths per year in the city. In particular, the lower social economic status neighborhoods would have big benefits because there are not so many trees around there. Now, the thing is, with these kind of things, the changes that you want to make, you can't do it. I'm coming from a public health sector. We can't really make the changes. So what you need is a multi-sectorial and systemic approach to addressing the current problems that we have in cities. So need to bring together urban and transport planners, education sector, architects, and whoever you can think, including public health, to address this issue. Also, it's important that we don't look at one pollutant, for example. I mean, there's a lot of emphasis on air pollution nowadays in cities, but we should attack and address many of the different exposures that we find in cities, like air pollution, noise, the heat islands, lack of green space, lack of physical activity, and now also the COVID-19. Also, I think it's important that we don't only address health, and that's probably also not what we're doing when we implement these measures, but that we also address livability, sustainability, climate change issues, and equity in this case. Of course, this is costing a lot of money, but we've heard that as part of the COVID response, there are going to be large financial stimulus packets available. And, you can only spend money once. So it's important that we're going to do it in the right way. So we should use the stimulus packets actually to create a more just, sustainable and livable society that with healthy citizens in there. And this should be some of the indicators in the new stimulus package. If it's possible, I believe so. We've seen some examples before, even without COVID-19. This is all where they had a very busy motorway before, what you can see on the left, and they transformed it, got rid of the motorway and transformed it into a much smaller road with green space and blue space around, a much nicer environment to be in. This is a hospital in Liverpool. On the left side, you see the hospital situated next to a park. It's a children's hospital. They asked the children, what would you like to see in your new hospital? And the children said, we wanted to have more green space. We want to walk around in the park. And so what they did, they built a new hospital on the side of the park and covered it. So it looks part of the park, and made the old hospital also a much larger green space area. So extending the green space, what is actually much better for the children. Also, there are cities that are thinking of going car-free. For example, here is Hamburg that says they're going to be car-free in 2034, and they have an active program to do this. And of course, there are already some neighborhoods that are actually car-free. This is Vauban in Freiburg. It's a car-free neighborhood with sustainable housing, no cars allowed, and there's a tram line and cycling paths to the city center that people actually can use. Some of these ideas I've written up in a recent review that you can find now online, and also we've done a book around the whole theme that also you can get. Actually, can buy, or I can send you a PDF copy if you send me an email. So what I'm looking for is healthier cities, healthier people, and I think we can do that by making cities greener, active, clean, and also more social. Thanks so much for your attention.